My sister's lie erased me from my family for 5 years, then her life ended up in my hands. My name is Dr. Claire Merritt, and I am 32 years old. 5 years ago, my sister called my parents and told them I had walked away from everything, that I had thrown my future in the trash, packed up my ambition, and chosen a man over medicine. Every word was a fabrication. Every syllable was designed to detonate my life from a safe distance. And it worked. My parents changed the locks on their hearts. Calls went unanswered. My number disappeared into the void. They missed my residency graduation. They didn't come to my wedding. For 5 full years, I existed to them the way a ghost exists, as something that used to be there, something better not spoken about. Then, 4 weeks ago, my sister was pulled from a crumpled car on Interstate 91, unconscious, bleeding from the inside, her body losing a quiet, urgent argument with time. The trauma team at Hartfield Medical Center was paged immediately. The OR doors swung open. And when my parents saw the name stitched onto the white coat, walking toward their daughter's stretcher, my mother's hand shot to my father's arm and held on so hard, she left 4 finger-shaped bruises on his forearm that lasted a week. But before we get into that room, before we get to that moment, I need to take you back, way back, to a kitchen table in central Connecticut, and the last time my father looked at me like I was worth something. Before that, take a second right now. If you've ever had someone in your family rewrite history to protect themselves, drop a comment. I want to know I'm not talking into empty air. And if this is the kind of story you've been waiting for, subscribe, because this one doesn't let up. Growing up in the Merritt house, there were 2 daughters, but there was really only one. My sister Vanessa is 3 years older than me. She came into the world performing, and she never stopped. School theater, student government, the kind of girl who could charm any adult at any dinner table and make them feel like the most interesting person in the room. My parents, Douglas and Helen, middle-class Connecticut, the kind of people who ironed their Sunday clothes and cared deeply about what the neighbors thought, absolutely adored her for it. Dad ran logistics for a regional distribution company. Mom worked part-time at an accounting firm. What they valued above everything else, how things looked, and whether the people they loved obeyed the unspoken rules of how things should look. Vanessa delivered both, flawlessly, for as long as I can remember. I was the other one, the quiet one, the one reading a biochemistry textbook at Thanksgiving while Vanessa held court at the table. I wasn't defiant. I wasn't angry. I was simply invisible, and there is a specific, hollow loneliness to being invisible inside your own home. It's not the same as being disliked. It's worse, in a way, because at least dislike requires someone to notice you first. Here is a small story that tells the larger one. In 8th grade, I made it to the state science fair, the only student from my middle school. I'd spent 3 months on a water purification model I was genuinely proud of. The same weekend, Vanessa had a community theater performance. My parents went to the theater. When I came home with a second-place ribbon, Dad glanced at it from the couch and said, "That's good, Claire." He didn't ask what my project was. He never asked about anything I made. I told myself it was fine. I told myself I didn't need the applause. I channeled every quiet ache into my grades, my AP coursework, my college applications. I figured if I couldn't be the daughter they saw, I would become the daughter they couldn't ignore. And for one extraordinary, impossible moment, I was. The acceptance letter arrived on a Tuesday in April. Pacific Northwest Medical College, one of the most competitive programs in the country, 3,000 miles from Connecticut. Vanessa was home that weekend, visiting from her apartment in Stamford where she worked as a marketing coordinator. Comfortable job, comfortable life. Nothing wrong with it, except that comfortable had always been Vanessa's ceiling, and she'd spent years pretending it was her choice. Dad read the letter at the kitchen table. I watched his eyebrows climb. Pacific Northwest Medical College, he said slowly, like he was reading something in a foreign language. That's a real program. Then he looked at me, really looked at me, and said 5 words I had spent my entire childhood waiting to hear. Maybe you'll amount to something. It wasn't warm, it wasn't a hug, but it was the closest thing to pride he'd ever aimed in my direction, and I held it like it was the only source of heat in a very cold room. Mom called her sister that same night. She called 2 neighbors. She called my grandmother. Her voice had a frequency I didn't recognize. Bright, almost giddy. Claire got into medical school, can you believe it? I could feel it from across the table. She believed in me. For the first time, she genuinely, openly believed in me. I looked at Vanessa. She was smiling, but the smile stopped perfectly at her lips. Her eyes were somewhere else, somewhere cool and calculating, doing the math on what this shift in the room's attention meant for her. I thought she was tired from the drive. That week, Vanessa started calling me regularly. 2, sometimes 3 times a week. How was packing going? Who were my classmates? What was the program like? She asked about professors, about friends, about every detail of my new world. She remembered names I mentioned in passing. She laughed at the right moments. She seemed, for the first time, genuinely curious about me. I thought we were finally becoming real sisters. I was cataloging myself for her. Every vulnerability, every fear, every person who mattered to me, I handed her all of it, and I did it willingly, grateful just to be asked. 3rd year of medical school, that's when the ground shifted. My closest friend, my roommate, the woman who had been my anchor through 2 years of brutal coursework, was named Dara. She'd grown up bouncing between foster homes, had no family to speak of, and was one of the sharpest, most quietly determined people I have ever met. When I called home during a crushing anatomy exam week and my mother said, "Can't really talk right now, Claire, Vanessa's having a hard week," it was Dara who sat with me on our apartment floor afterward and said, "Their loss. Get up. We have a cadaver practical in 9 hours." Dara was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer in August of our 3rd year. No family, no safety net, just me. I went to the dean's office the morning after her diagnosis. I explained the situation clearly and completely. He approved a formal leave of absence, 1 semester, documented as caregiver status, my enrollment spot held, my return to January confirmed. Everything filed correctly, everything above board. I called Vanessa to tell her. I still can't fully explain why. Maybe some part of me still believed she was who she had been pretending to be. I told her about Dara, about the leave, about the plan to return in spring. Vanessa's voice was warm syrup. "Oh, Claire, of course you should be there for her. I won't breathe a word to Mom and Dad, they'd only panic." 3 days later, she called our parents. I don't know exactly what she said that night. I wouldn't learn the full architecture of the lie until 5 years later, when it finally collapsed in the one place none of us could have predicted. But the damage was instant. The call came at 11 at night. I was sitting in a plastic chair in the oncology ward next to Dara's hospital bed. She'd had a bad reaction to her latest chemo round, and they'd admitted her overnight. My phone lit up. "Dad. Your sister told us everything." His voice was flat, frozen, the dropping out, the boyfriend, all of it. "Dad, that's not." Vanessa showed us the messages, she showed us proof. I pressed my hand against the wall. "What messages? What proof?" "Dad, I'm sitting in a hospital right now. I'm here for my friend." "She said you'd say that?" A pause, the kind that has weight. "She said you'd have a story ready." Mom got on the line next, her voice shaking. "How could you deceive us for an entire year, Claire? How could you?" "Mom, please, I can give you the paperwork. I can give you the dean's direct number. I filed everything. There is a paper trail." "Enough, Dad again. Don't call here until you're ready to tell the truth." The line died. I sat on that hospital floor for 20 minutes. Dara's IV beeped on the other side of the curtain. My phone still showed the call time, 4 minutes and 11 seconds. That was how long it took for my parents to erase me. 20 minutes later, a text from Vanessa. "I'm sorry, Claire. I couldn't keep your secret anymore. I had to tell them." She wasn't sorry. She had executed the most precisely aimed strike of her life, and she'd signed it with a broken heart emoji. I was 3,000 miles from home. I had $43 in my bank account, and I had just become nobody's daughter. I tried. I need you to understand that. From 3,000 miles away, with no money and a dying friend in the next room, I tried everything. Over 5 days, I called my parents 14 times. The first 3 went to voicemail. By the 4th call, Dad's number had blocked mine. Mom blocked me 2 days after that. I sent 2 emails, one brief, one detailed, with my leave of absence paperwork attached as a PDF, the dean's direct line, Dara's oncologist's name. Neither received a response. I wrote a handwritten letter and mailed it priority from across the country. 5 days later, it came back to me, returned to sender, unopened. I recognized my mother's handwriting. Ting on the envelope. I called my Aunt Patricia, my father's younger sister, the one person in the family who had always treated both daughters as equally worthy. She called Dad that same evening. I know because she called me back 40 minutes later, voice heavy with apology. He told me to stay out of it, sweetheart. He said you've made your bed. Patricia had tried to explain about the leave of absence. Dad had hung up on her. 5 days, 14 calls, 2 emails, 1 letter, 1 intermediary, every attempt rejected, blocked, or returned, and underneath all of it, the awful recognition that this wasn't new. This was the entire story of my childhood, compressed into its most devastating expression. Every science fair they skipped. Every time Vanessa's version of events was accepted as fact while mine was dismissed without a second thought. This was just the final, loudest echo of a pattern that had started long before either of us knew what it was. On the 6th day, I stopped calling. Not because I surrendered, because I finally understood they had chosen a long time ago. Vanessa hadn't created the dynamic. She had simply given them permission to stop performing the opposite of it. Dara died on a Sunday morning in December. Quiet, just the long, flat tone of the monitor and pale winter light easing through the hospice window. I was the only person in the room. No one in my family knew. No one called. The one person I'd told, Vanessa, was too occupied maintaining the lie she'd planted to acknowledge that the reason for my leave had just stopped breathing. I organized a small service. 6 people came. Dara's former foster sister drove 4 hours from Eugene, a few classmates, a nurse from the oncology ward who had grown genuinely fond of her. I stood at the front of a chapel built for 60 and delivered a eulogy to rows of empty wooden pews. I didn't cry, not because I wasn't shattered. I had been crying for 3 months straight, and there was simply nothing left. That night, alone in our apartment, Dara's coffee mug still on the counter, her jacket still on the hook by the door, I opened my laptop and stared at the re-enrollment form. Then I found something tucked inside Dara's copy of Grey's Anatomy. A yellow sticky note, her handwriting unsteady but deliberate. Finish what you started, Claire. Become the doctor I know you are. Don't let anyone, especially your own blood, define who you are. She had written it weeks before she died. She knew she wouldn't be there when I needed the push. I closed the laptop. Then I opened it again and I filled out the re-enrollment form. 2 choices, collapse or continue. I chose to continue. Not for my parents, not for revenge. For Dara and for the version of myself she had believed in when I couldn't. I went back in January. No financial support. No family safety net. Extra loans, a part-time research assistant position, hospital cafeteria food more often than I'll ever admit. Medical school doesn't pause for grief. Anatomy exams don't reschedule because your family has disowned you. 12-hour rotations don't get shorter because you cried in a supply closet at 2 in the morning. So I stopped crying and started building. I graduated on time. No one from Connecticut came. I matched into a surgical residency at Hartfield Medical Center, a level 1 trauma center, one of the most demanding in New England. That's where I met Dr. Margaret Holloway, 60 years old, chief of surgery, emeritus. The kind of woman who made medical students stand straighter just by entering a room. She became the mentor I hadn't known I needed, and the steady, consistent presence I had been quietly starving for. 3rd year of residency, I met Owen Merritt. A civil rights attorney, pro bono work, calm eyes, dry humor, the first person I had ever told the full story to who didn't flinch, didn't offer to fix it, didn't collapse under the weight of it. He just listened. Then he said, "You deserved better than all of it." 4 words, that was enough. We married on a Saturday in October, in Margaret's backyard, 30 guests. Owen's father walked me down the aisle. I had sent an invitation to Connecticut. It came back the way the letter had unopened. But Aunt Patricia was there. She cried enough for 2 parents. After the ceremony, Margaret handed me a sealed envelope. "A nomination," she said. "Don't open it yet, you're not ready?" I put it in my desk drawer without asking questions. 5 years passed. I became someone they wouldn't recognize. Pause here for a second. If your family ever chose someone else's comfortable lie over your inconvenient truth, drop a comment. Just the word "seen," because I want you to know I see you. And keep watching because the turn is coming. January, present day. I am 32 years old. I am the chief of trauma surgery at Hartfield Medical Center. I have a house with a porch that catches good morning light, a husband who makes me laugh every single day, and a golden retriever named Hippocrates, Hippo for short, who has never once judged me for eating cereal at midnight. It's a real life, a good one, built entirely from scratch, brick by brick, with no blueprint and no family support. But there is a particular kind of ache that doesn't heal cleanly. It lives somewhere between your ribs in the space where a family is supposed to be. I don't wake up hoping for a Connecticut area code anymore. I don't sit with my phone waiting. But every Thanksgiving, there is a moment, just a flash, when I count the place settings and feel the missing ones like a phantom limb. Aunt Patricia still calls every Sunday. She's my thread back. I never ask about my parents, but I always listen when she volunteers. Mom and Dad were healthy. Vanessa had gone through a divorce 2 years prior. She was now selling pharmaceutical equipment to hospitals. The irony registered, and I let it sit there without touching it. The previous Sunday, Patricia's voice carried something I hadn't heard from her in years. Caution. There's something I need to tell you about Vanessa, Claire. Something that's been worrying me. My pager went off before she could finish. Trauma activation. I told her I'd call her back. I never got the chance. Because what Patricia was trying to warn me about was already airborne, already moving, hurtling down the interstate at 60 miles per hour toward a red light that wasn't going to stop for it. And within the hour, what she was warning me about would be on my operating table. I just didn't know it yet. Let me back up. Because what Vanessa did wasn't a single lie. It was a campaign. A sustained, multi-year architecture of deception that Patricia had been feeding me in careful, reluctant fragments over the years, like she was diffusing something explosive one wire at a time. The picture she painted was more calculated than I'd allowed myself to imagine. For 5 years, Vanessa had maintained the story at every family gathering, Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter. She performed the role of the burdened older sister, the one who had stayed, the one who had tried. We don't really talk about Claire, she'd tell relatives, shaking her head with practiced sorrow. It's too hard on Mom and Dad. She'd lower her voice. Let the silence do the heavier lifting. But she didn't stop at silence. She told our grandmother I was homeless. She told our Uncle Robert's wife she'd heard from mutual friends that I was in and out of treatment programs. She told our mother, on Christmas Eve 2 years earlier, that she had personally reached out to me and I had refused, that I was the one who had cut the family off. She inverted the entire story. She made herself the one who had tried, and me the one who had turned my back. Patricia told me this once, her voice tight with a specific kind of fury, the kind that comes from watching something terrible happen in slow motion while being powerless to stop it. She said at Thanksgiving that she'd begged you to come home, Patricia told me. That you wouldn't even answer her calls, that she thought you hated them all. Meanwhile, I was 4 floors deep in an operating room, saving someone's life. The genius of it, and I use that word the way you'd use it to describe something that is brilliant and reprehensible in equal measure, was that Vanessa didn't need my parents to forget me. She needed them to believe I had abandoned them. That way their grief became self-justifying. Their silence became righteous. And she remained exactly what she'd always wanted to be. The loyal daughter, the one who stayed, the one who was loved without question. She wasn't protecting them, she was protecting her position. And then there was the thing Patricia hadn't told me yet, something that emerged later, slowly, from a different direction entirely. Owen told me over coffee one morning, 6 months before any of this came to a head. He set his mug down carefully, the way he does when he's shifting into lawyer mode, because what he's about to say requires it. There's something I've been sitting on for 2 years, he said. A colleague of his had traced an inquiry made to the HR department at my previous hospital. Someone using an alias had contacted them asking whether my credentials were legitimate, whether I'd ever been disciplined, whether there was anything on record that suggested I wasn't who I claimed to be. The IP address came back to a residential address in Hartfield, Connecticut. The kitchen went absolutely quiet. Hippo's tail thumped against the floor. The coffee maker hissed. She was hunting, I said. She was hunting for anything, Owen confirmed. Anything she could use to extend the story, to keep you buried. He reached across the table and put his hand over mine. She didn't find anything. Because there's nothing to find. He held my eyes. This stopped being sibling rivalry a long Tim. Go, Claire. He was right, this was something more deliberate, more persistent. Vanessa hadn't told a lie and moved on. She had built a structure around it, load-bearing walls, reinforced foundations, and she had spent 5 years performing maintenance, making sure nothing shifted. I could have done something then, confronted my parents directly, involved a lawyer, detonated the whole thing publicly, but I didn't. Because life was about to do it for me, in the most unforeseeable, unscripted, and ironic way imaginable. And it started with a pager at 3 in the morning. Thursday night, 3:07 a.m. The pager pulled me out of a dead sleep. Owen shifted beside me. Hippo lifted his head from the foot of the bed. The screen glowed in the dark. Level 1 trauma, MVC single female 35, blunt abdominal trauma, hemodynamically unstable, ETA 8 minutes. I was dressed in 4 minutes, driving in 6. The roads were empty and wet, that particular shade of black that January gives Connecticut at 3 in the morning. I ran the case in my head the way I always do: mechanism of injury, probable organ involvement, surgical options, motor vehicle collision, blunt abdominal force, unstable vitals, most likely, splenic rupture, possible liver involvement. I'd handled this surgery well over 100 times. I badged through the ambulance bay entrance and walked straight to the trauma bay. My team was already assembling, 2 residents, the charge nurse, anesthesia on standby. I picked up the intake tablet and opened the incoming chart. Patient Vanessa Calloway, DOB, March 14, 1990. Emergency contact, Douglas Calloway father. I stopped walking. The hallway sounds, the intercom, the beeping monitors, the squeak of shoes on linoleum, pulled back like a retreating wave. For 3 seconds, maybe 4, I wasn't a surgeon. I was 26 years old, sitting on a hospital floor in the Pacific Northwest, a phone warm in my hand and a dial tone where my family used to be. Dr. Merritt, my charge nurse Linda, appeared at my elbow. You okay? I looked up, I set the tablet down. Prep Bay 2, and page Dr. Vasquez, I want him on standby. The ambulance siren rose in the distance, getting closer. And I knew, before the doors opened, before I could see anything, that somewhere behind that ambulance, 2 people were running that I hadn't faced in 5 years. The stretcher came through fast. Vanessa was strapped down, unconscious, oxygen mask fogging with every shallow breath, blood soaking through the left side of her shirt, one hand trailing off the side rail. The paramedics called out their numbers, blood pressure dropping, heart rate climbing, 2 large-bore IVs running wide open. Behind them, frantic, came my parents. My mother looked like she'd aged 10 years since I'd last seen her. Hair thinner, face drawn, still in a bathrobe with her slippers on the wrong feet. My father was in flannel and jeans, clearly thrown on in a panic, his face the color of old ash. That's my daughter, he called past the triage nurse, voice breaking at the edges. Where are they taking her? I need to speak with whoever is in charge. I need the top surgeon in this building right now. The triage nurse, Carla, a woman I'd worked alongside for 3 years, raised both hands to slow him. Sir, family needs to wait in the surgical waiting area. The trauma chief is already here. The case is being handled. Get me the chief, Dad said. Get me the chief right now. Carla glanced through the glass partition toward the trauma bay, where I stood in my surgical gown, badge visible at chest height. She read the name. I watched the recognition move across her face. I gave her a small, deliberate shake of my head. Not yet. Carla steadied herself. Sir, the chief is preparing for surgery. You'll be updated as soon as possible. The waiting room is this way. My parents were walked down the corridor. My mother's hands were clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone white, lips moving quietly. My father kept turning back, looking through every glass panel he passed. She's all we have, he said to no one. Please, she's all we have. I heard it through the partition. She's all we have. As though I had never existed. As though I were not, at this precise moment, the only reason his daughter had any chance at all. I stepped into the scrub room alone. 30 seconds, that was all I allowed myself. I turned on the hot water, let it run over my hands, looked at my reflection in the polished steel above the sink, distorted and warped, the way everything felt in that particular moment. Scrub cap on, badge visible. The face of a woman who had been surgically removed from her own family's story, now being asked to perform actual surgery to keep the person who'd held the scalpel still breathing. Part of me considered walking out, calling Vasquez, letting a stranger carry this, letting my parents spend the rest of their lives owing their daughter's survival to someone they'd never recognize. That would have been cleaner. But there was a woman on that table with a ruptured spleen and a grade 3 liver laceration. She was losing blood faster than we could replace it. She had, at most, 35 minutes before we lost her entirely. And the best surgeon in that building was me. I paged Vasquez directly. I have a conflict of interest. The incoming patient is a family member. I'm disclosing it now and documenting it in the chart. If my judgment becomes compromised at any point, you take the lead. No discussion needed." His voice was steady. "Understood, Chief." I had Linda note the disclosure in the nursing record. Everything documented, everything by the book. Then I pulled on fresh gloves, pushed through the OR doors, and looked down at the table. Vanessa's face, bruised, the oxygen mask misting with shallow breaths. She looked smaller than I remembered, thinner. There were lines around her eyes that hadn't been there 5 years ago. For 3 seconds, she wasn't the woman who had dismantled my life. She was a body on my table, and that was exactly what I needed her to be. "Let's go, scalpel." 3 hours and 42 minutes. Ruptured spleen removed. Grade 3 liver laceration, repaired with precision sutures, layer by layer. Internal bleeding from 2 separate mesenteric vessels, clamped, cauterized, controlled. I spoke only when necessary. Suction, clamp, lap pad, retract. My hands moved the way years of training had shaped them to move, steady when steadiness was required, deliberate when precision mattered more than speed. My residents watched. They always watch my cases, and I could feel their attention sharpen when the liver repair hit a complicated stretch. I didn't hesitate, I couldn't. At 6:49 a.m., I placed the final closing stitch. Vanessa's vitals were stable, blood pressure normalized, output clear, she was alive. Dr. Vasquez, who had stood quietly in the corner for the entire surgery, pulled down his mask. "Claire," he said quietly, "that was immaculate." I peeled off my gloves, dropped them in the bin, washed my hands. Automatic, methodical. The same sequence I'd completed 10,000 times before. "Do you want me to brief the family?" he asked. I dried my hands. "No, this one's mine." I caught my reflection again in the scrub room mirror. Same face, same badge, but something had shifted irrevocably behind my eyes. For 5 years, I had been the daughter who vanished. In 4 minutes, I would walk into a waiting room as the surgeon who had just pulled her sister back from the edge of death. I straightened my scrub top, checked my badge, took a single breath. Then I walked toward the waiting room. The hallway had never felt so long. The waiting room had the specific fluorescent stillness of a hospital at 7 in the morning, that suspended, time outside of time quality that settles after the last visitors leave and before the day shift fully arrives. 2 other families occupied the far corners. A television murmured weather forecasts to nobody in particular. In the center row, sitting rigid and sleepless and wrecked, were my parents. I pushed through the double doors, still in surgical scrubs, mask pulled down, scrub cap off, hair pulled back. My badge hung at chest level in plain block text anyone could read from 6 feet away. Dr. Claire Merritt, MD, FACS, Chief of Trauma Surgery. Dad stood first, reflex. He always needed to be standing. "Doctor, how is she? Is Vanessa?" He stopped. His eyes dropped to my badge, rose to my face, dropped back to the badge. I watched the recognition move through him, not like a thought, but like something seismic. A tremor that started in his hands and traveled upward, reaching his jaw, his eyes. Mom looked up a half second behind him. Her lips opened. No sound came out. Her right hand flew to Dad's forearm and gripped it with a force that, I would later learn, left 4 distinct bruises in the shape of fingertips. 5 seconds of silence. 5 seconds that contained 5 years. I spoke first, calm, clinical, the same voice I use for every family in every waiting room. "Mr. and Mrs. Calloway, I'm Dr. Merritt, Chief of Trauma Surgery. Your daughter Vanessa sustained a ruptured spleen and a grade 3 liver laceration in the accident. Surgery was successful. She is stable and currently in the ICU. You'll be able to see her in approximately 1 hour. Mr. and Mrs. Calloway, not Mom, not Dad." I watched that land. I watched it cut exactly as deep as I'd intended. Behind me, through the glass partition, Linda and 2 nurses were watching. Their faces told me they'd already put it together. My mother moved first. She took a step toward me, arms lifting, a sound already tearing free from somewhere in her chest. "Claire, oh my God, Claire." I stepped back half a step, polite, unmistakable. She stopped, her hands hung in the air between us, then slowly, like something deflating, fell back to her sides. Dad's voice came out rough, stripped of everything except the bare question. "You're a surgeon." "I am." "You're the chief of this department." "I have been for 2 years." "But Vanessa said she said you?" He closed his mouth, opened it, closed it again. I could watch the machinery of 5 years of certainty trying to reassemble itself in real time and failing. "What exactly did she tell you?" I kept my voice even. No tremor. I had rehearsed this conversation 1,000 times in the shower, in the car, lying awake at 2 a.m., and I had never once imagined it happening under fluorescent lights in a surgical waiting room. But here we were. "She told you I dropped out, that there was a boyfriend, that I had chosen someone over medicine, that I was homeless, that I refused all contact." I paused. None of it was true, not one word. Through the glass, I could see Carla press her hand to her mouth. One of the second-year residents, Dr. Park, looked away, jaw tight. Linda set down her clipboard and stared. Dad tried to redirect, old muscle memory. "This isn't the place for this, Claire. Your sister is in the ICU." "I know. I just spent 3 hours and 42 minutes making sure she survived. I'm aware of where she is." He had nothing. For the first time in my life, the absolute first time, my father, a man who had always had a decree ready, a verdict waiting, a door ready to close, had nothing. The silence moved into the space where his certainty used to be, and it did the work I had never been able to do from 3,000 miles away. Mom reached for a chair to steady herself. Her voice came out small and fractured. "You said you sent letters." 2 emails with my leave documentation attached. 1 handwritten letter, mailed priority. "You returned it to me unopened, Mom. I recognized your handwriting on the outside of the envelope." She pressed her fist against her mouth. "I called 14 times in 5 days. I asked Aunt Patricia to speak with you directly. Dad told her to stay out of it." I wasn't raising my voice. I wasn't accusing. I was reciting. Facts don't require volume. They require only patience. Then Linda appeared at the waiting room door. No idea of the full story. Routine hospital business. Reading from her tablet with the particular briskness of someone delivering ordinary good news. "Dr. Merritt, sorry to interrupt." The board chair reviewed the overnight trauma log. "The physician of the year selection committee asked me to pass along their congratulations on tonight's outcome." She said it the way she'd say anything routine. She had no idea she'd just dropped a second grenade in the same room. Mom looked at me, eyes swollen, mascara gone, still in her bathrobe. "Physician of the year. It's an internal recognition, it's not important." I turned to Linda. "Thank you, I need to check post-op vitals." I walked toward the ICU corridor. Measured steps, spine straight. I did not look back, but I heard my mother's voice behind me, small, ruined, directed at my father. "Jerry, what have we done?" And then, for the first time I could remember, my father said nothing. Because for the first time, silence was the only honest answer he had. 4 hours later, ICU room 6, morning light coming through the blinds in long pale stripes, the monitor keeping its steady rhythm. I came in for the standard post-op assessment, vitals, drainage output, wound check. Routine, except that nothing about any of this was routine. Vanessa's eyes were open, glassy from the anesthesia, unfocused, tracking the ceiling, the IV pole, the window. Then her gaze moved sideways and found me. She squinted. "Read my badge, read it again." The color left her face the way it leaves patients who have just received difficult news. Completely, immediately, as though something beneath the skin simply drained away. "Claire, barely a sound." "Good morning, I'm your attending surgeon. You had a ruptured spleen and a grade 3 liver laceration. Surgery went well, you'll make a full recovery." "You're a doctor, not a question, a reckoning." "I'm the chief of this department, have been for 2 years." I watched her move through the same sequence my father had, confusion, disbelief, fear, but slower, filtered through a morphine drip and what I suspect was dawning vertiginous terror. And then, just beneath the surface of that fear, something I recognized immediately because I had watched it my entire life. The flicker behind her eyes. The quick recalibration. Even now, in a hospital bed held together by my sutures, Vanessa was looking for the angle. "Claire, listen, I can explain all of it if you just let me." "You don't need to explain anything to me." I nodded toward the glass door where 2 figures stood in the hallway, faces destroyed, eyes red, watching. "You need to explain it to them." I updated her. "See." Hart checked the drain and walked out without looking back. I didn't stay to witness what came next. I didn't need to. The ICU floor heard it anyway. Okay, real talk. What do you think Vanessa did the moment our parents walked into that room? Option A, she finally tells the truth. Option B, she doubles down on every lie. Option C, she makes herself the victim. Drop your answer below, because if you guessed option C, you already know my sister. The moment my parents stepped through the door, Vanessa's face crumpled into tears. Big, heaving sobs that pulled at her stitches and sent the heart monitor spiking. The ICU nurse, stationed at the desk just outside the room's glass wall, told Linda everything she heard. Mom, Dad, I never meant for it to go this far. I was protecting her. I was scared for her. Dad stood at the foot of the bed. His voice was barely under control. Vanessa, Claire is a surgeon. She is the chief of trauma surgery at this hospital. I didn't know it would end up like this. She said she sent letters. She said she called 14 times. She said Patricia tried to tell us. Mom's voice was flat, hollowed out. Is that true? She exaggerates, you know how she. Patricia tried to tell us. Dad again. This time his voice cracked, not from sadness, but from the structural failure of a certainty he'd been standing on for 5 years. 2 years ago, Patricia said Claire was in residency. A surgeon. You told us Patricia was causing drama. You told us not to listen. Patricia didn't have the whole. What is the whole story, Vanessa? Mom's voice, sharp and sudden. We blocked her number because you told us to. Silence, the heart monitor beeped. The IV dripped. Vanessa pressed back against her pillow, IVs in both arms, my sutures holding her organs together, and did what she had always done when cornered. She pivoted to offense. Fine, she's a doctor, good for her, but she left this family. We left her, Dad said, barely above a whisper. She didn't leave, we pushed her out. For perhaps the first time in her adult life, Vanessa had no script to fall back on. The persona she'd been wearing for 35 years lay in pieces on the linoleum. No audience left who would believe the performance. Aunt Patricia arrived at the ICU at 9:48 that morning. I'd called her from the scrub room right after surgery, not as a weapon, but because Vanessa was her niece too, and Patricia deserved to know. What I hadn't anticipated was that Patricia would arrive with 5 years of receipts and the long, patient fury of a woman who had watched an injustice she wasn't allowed to correct. She didn't sit down, she didn't embrace anyone. She stood in the center of that room and said, I have been waiting 5 years for this conversation, and I am done waiting. She pulled out her phone. Inside a folder she'd labeled, I found out later, Irene proof she had kept everything. Screenshots of every email I'd sent my parents in those first desperate days. A PDF of my formal leave of absence from the medical school, signed by the dean, stamped with the registrar's seal. My re-enrollment confirmation. A photograph of my residency graduation, me in cap and gown, holding the diploma, Patricia standing beside me. The only family member in the frame. She held the phone out. Mom took it with trembling hands. And here, Patricia said, swiping to a separate text thread, this is a message Vanessa sent me 4 years ago. She read it aloud. Don't say anything to Mom and Dad about Claire's residency. It'll only confuse them. They're finally moving on. The room went absolutely still. Vanessa stared at the ceiling. Her jaw was set, but the calculation was gone from her face. What replaced it was something I had never seen there, the expression of someone who has finally run out of rooms. You told me to stay quiet for the family's sake, Patricia said, looking directly at Vanessa. But this family hasn't been at peace. It's been living inside a lie. She turned to my parents. And you too, you let this happen. Not because you didn't love Claire, but because believing Vanessa was easier than doing the work of finding out the truth. Nobody argued. There was nothing left to argue with. Mom sank into the chair beside the bed. She wasn't looking at Vanessa. She was scrolling slowly through Patricia's phone, reading my emails one by one. Her lips moved as she read. She stopped on the last one, the one I'd sent the night before my residency graduation. I know exactly what it says. I've reread it 100 times. Mom, I don't know if you'll ever open this. I graduated today. I wish you had been here. I am still your daughter. I never stopped being your daughter. Mom bent forward in the chair. It was beyond crying. It was the sound of someone finally meeting the full weight of something they can never go back and undo. Dad stood at the window, back to the room. His shoulders were aching. Patricia told me later it was the first time in 62 years she had ever seen her older brother cry. Not at their mother's funeral. Not when his company nearly collapsed. Never. He cried now silently, facing the parking lot, while the monitor beeped behind him, and everything he thought he had known lay quietly demolished on the floor. Monica had gone still in the bed. Nothing left to perform. No audience that would buy it. The identity she'd constructed and maintained for 3.5 decades had come apart, and no amount of charm or tears or reframing was going to restore it. "You missed her wedding, Douglas." Patricia's voice was quiet now, spent. Owen's father walked her down the aisle. "Do you understand what that means?" Dad didn't turn from the window, but he spoke 4 words, low and fractured and final. "What have we done?" Not a question, a conviction. I came back that afternoon, end of my shift, 23 hours since the pager had woken me. My parents were still there. Where else would they have gone? Mom stood the moment I walked in. Her face was wrecked, eyes nearly swollen shut. "Claire, baby, I am so sorry, I am so. I raised my hand gently, not cold, not harsh, firm. "I hear you, I believe that you mean it, but sorry is a word, it's a starting place, not a destination." I held her gaze. "I need time. What I don't need is a grand gesture, I need time." Dad turned from the window. He looked like a man who had set down something very heavy and didn't know what to do with his hands. "We want to make this right." "Then you need to understand something." I kept my voice even, the kind of even that only comes after you've exhausted every other register. "I am not the girl you sent away. I'm not the girl who called 14 times from 3,000 miles away and got nothing back. I am someone who built a life, a complete, real life without you. If you want to be part of it going forward, that happens on my terms. Not Vanessa's, not yours, mine." Dad opened his mouth, the old reflex, then he closed it. And he nodded. A small, devastated nod that contained more honesty than anything he'd said to me in 30 years. I looked at Vanessa on the bed. She was watching me. "When you're recovered," I said, "you and I are going to have a real conversation. Not today. Today you're my patient and I don't blur those lines." I left. Spine straight, steps measured. I didn't look back. I am not slamming the door, but I am the one who decides when it opens, how far, and who comes through. 2 weeks later, Vanessa was discharged. I chose the meeting place, a coffee shop in Middletown. Neutral, neither of our territory. Owen came but sat at a separate table near the window, professionally studying a stack of briefs he was definitely not reading. Vanessa walked in looking hollowed out. She'd lost weight, surgery and stress will do that. The confidence she used to wear like a second skin was absent. For the first time in my memory, she looked precisely her age. She sat across from me, wrapped her hands around a cup she didn't drink, and stared at the table. I didn't preamble. I'm not going to raise my voice. I'm not going to walk you through the list of every lie, you know the list. What I want to know is why. A silence long enough that the barista called a name, and it echoed off the walls. Then, because you were going to become everything I wasn't, and I couldn't stand it. I let that sit. That's honest, probably the first honest thing you've said to me in 10 years. I'm sorry, Claire. Her eyes were wet. Real tears, I know the difference now. I know you are, but sorry doesn't give me back the years. Sorry doesn't put my father at my wedding. Sorry doesn't unreturn the box Mom shipped back to me with my high school things inside, like I was already dead to her. She looked away. Then she said something I hadn't prepared for. I called the medical school, twice. I tried to tell the administration you'd fabricated the caregiver documentation. I wanted them to pull your leave approval. I held her gaze. The dean didn't listen to you. No. That wasn't him protecting me, Vanessa. He believed the truth. That's different. I leaned back in my chair. I had mapped this conversation out on the kitchen floor the night before, Hippo's head in my lap, Owen reviewing it with me like a closing argument. I'm not removing you from my life, I said, but I'm setting conditions. She nodded. You will correct the record with every family member you lied to. Every single one. Aunts, uncles, cousins, whoever heard the rehab stories or the homelessness stories or the Claire abandoned us story. You will correct every single one in writing. An email to the entire family group. Patricia will confirm delivery. I will. And you will understand that my forgiveness, if it comes, will come on its own timeline. I'm not promising it, I'm not withholding it as punishment. I'm telling you it's not something you can schedule. She nodded again, smaller this time, no performance left in it. The following week, I sat at my parents' kitchen table. The same table where Dad had read my acceptance letter years ago with his eyebrows climbing. The same table where Vanessa had smiled with just her mouth. Owen drove me, he waited in the car. I'm open to rebuilding, I told them. What I need from you is counseling. Not for me, for yourselves. You need to understand how you believed a lie about your own daughter and never once picked up the phone to verify it. Dad's jaw set, we don't really do that, sort of. I know you don't, that's exactly why we're here. Mom put her hand on his arm gently. He looked at her, looked at me, something behind his eyes, not open yet, but moving in that direction. Fine. I stood, then turned back. One more thing, Owen's father walked me down the aisle. That happened. We can't change it. But if you want to meet your future grandchildren someday, you start now, not with a gesture, but with consistency. Apologies have expiration dates, boundaries don't. 1 month later, the Physician of the Year Gala. 200 people in the ballroom of the Hartford Marquee. Surgeons, administrators, board members, donors, crystal glasses, name tags, a string quartet playing something classical that nobody in the room was actually listening to. I wore a simple black dress. Owen sat at a front table looking entirely at ease in a way only civil rights attorneys can manage at formal events. Margaret Holloway sat beside him, arms crossed, wearing the faint, satisfied smile of someone who has been engineering this moment for years. The MC stepped to the podium. This year's Physician of the Year is a surgeon whose clinical excellence, composure under extraordinary circumstances, and unwavering commitment to her patients have redefined the standard for this institution. Dr. Claire Merritt, Chief of Trauma Surgery. Standing ovation from the surgical staff. The residents in the third row were on their feet before anyone else. I walked to the stage, spotlight warm, podium solid under my hands. I kept it brief. 5 years ago, I almost stopped. Not because I couldn't do the work, but because I lost the people I believed I needed in order to keep going. What I learned is that the people you truly need aren't always the people you're born to. Sometimes they are the ones who choose you. I looked at Margaret, at Owen, at my team in the third row. And sometimes I looked toward the back of the ballroom. Last row, 2 seats Patricia had quietly arranged, my parents, Mom in a navy dress she'd clearly bought that week, Dad in a tie he visibly hated but was wearing anyway, both sitting with their hands in their laps, looking up at the stage with expressions I can only describe as grief and pride losing a slow, painful war with each other. And sometimes, the ones you were born to find their way back. Late, but here. Mom covered her mouth. Dad stood up. The room filled with sound. After the gala, Dad found Owen near the coat check. He stood in front of my husband for a long moment. I owe you an apology, he said. I should have been the one to walk her down that aisle. Owen, gracious in the way that only truly decent people manage, extended his hand. With respect, sir, you should have been a lot of things, but you're here now. They shook hands. Dad didn't let go right away. Vanessa sent the email on a Wednesday night. Patricia confirmed delivery to all 47 family addresses. I didn't read it until the following morning. Owen brought me coffee and set the laptop on the kitchen table without a word. He understands when to give me space. 3 paragraphs, no flowery language, no self-justifying preamble, just the facts laid out plainly. She had lied about my leaving medical school. She had fabricated evidence to support that lie. She had maintained the deception for 5 years and actively prevented our parents from learning the truth. She ended with, Claire never abandoned this family. I made certain they believed she had. That is entirely my responsibility. The responses came in over the following days. Uncle Robert's wife called Patricia in tears. She had repeated one of Vanessa's stories at a dinner party 2 years earlier. My cousin Daniel in Vermont sent Vanessa a single line, I don't know who you are anymore. Our grandmother, 89 years old, the family's original North Star, called me directly. Her voice was paper-thin but sharp with fury. I am 89 years old, she said, and I have never been lied to so completely by my own blood. Claire, forgive an old woman for not seeing it. There's nothing to forgive, Nana. You were deceived, we all were. Nobody organized a family boycott of Vanessa. Nobody declared her dead to them. But the currency she'd been spending for 35 years, the accumulated capital of being believed, evaporated. You could feel it in the replies that didn't come, in the invitations that quietly stopped arriving, in the new particular silence that met her name at gatherings. No one punished her, they simply stopped believing her. For someone who had built her entire identity on being believed, that was punishment enough. My parents started counseling in February. A therapist in West Hartford named Dr. Osai, direct, calm, the kind of clinician who doesn't let you sidestep the real question. Mom adapted quickly. She had been carrying the weight of her silence for years without naming it, and the first time Dr. Osai named it for her, passive enabling, she broke down in the session and cried for nearly 40 minutes. That's what Patricia told me. I wasn't there. It wasn't mine to witness. Dad was harder. He went. He sat in the chair. He answered in as few words as possible. Dr. Osai told him, Patricia relayed, that his need to be right, his inability to revisit a decision once it had been made, had been the load-bearing wall of the entire collapse. Vanessa had provided the lie. His pride had cemented it in place and held it there for 5 years. He didn't argue with her. 3 weeks in, Mom mailed me a letter, handwritten. The irony was not lost on either of us. I failed you, she wrote. Not only when I chose to believe Vanessa, but every time before that. Every time I chose quiet over fairness, every time I let your father's certainty override my own doubt, every time I saw you standing in the doorway, patient and waiting, and told myself you were fine because it was easier than admitting I wasn't brave enough to look harder. I read it at the kitchen table. Hippo was asleep on my feet. Owen was in the next room, pretending very convincingly not to listen. I didn't cry, but I held that letter for a long time. Then I opened the desk drawer where I keep the things that matter. Sarah's sticky note, the returned envelope with my mother's handwriting on the outside, the wedding invitation that came back unopened, and I placed the letter inside. Same drawer, different side. Progress isn't always visible. Sometimes it's just what you choose to carry differently. Vanessa started therapy too, her own, separate from any family work. We've had 3 coffees since that first meeting, each one short, each one a little less armored than the last. The third time, she said, I don't expect you to forgive me. I'm not sure I'd deserve it if you did, but I want you to know I'm trying not to be who I was. I took a sip of my coffee, set it down. Then show me. Words are cheap in this family, always have been. Show me with time. She nodded, didn't push, didn't perform, didn't try to close the distance faster than I'd allow. That was new. Do I believe her? I honestly don't know yet. I've spent a lifetime learning to read Vanessa's performances, and I still can't locate the exact boundary between who she has been and who she might be becoming. Maybe she can't either. Maybe that's what the work is for. What I do know is this: she carries my surgical scar on her body. 7 inches, left upper abdomen, fading from red toward white over the coming year. Every morning when she gets dressed, every time she glances in a mirror, she will see the mark left by the sister she tried to erase. The sister who, when it mattered most, held a scalpel with steady hands and chose the oath over the anger. I carry her damage in my memory. 5 years of silence, lodged somewhere between my ribs like a healed fracture that still aches in cold weather. In the strangest, most painful way 2 sisters can be, we are even. And maybe with enough time, enough unglamorous, unsexy, day-by-day consistent time, we'll find our way to something that isn't even. Something new. I'm sitting in my office at Hartfield. Late, the hallway outside has gone quiet. My nameplate is on the door. My diplomas are on the wall not because I need to see them, but because the residents do. On my desk, a framed photograph from my wedding. Owen, Margaret, Patricia, 30 guests, an October backyard going gold in the afternoon light. No parents in the frame. On the bookshelf beside it, a new photograph. Taken 3 weeks ago. My parents standing on my front porch in their winter coats, looking slightly lost. Dad's hands in his pockets, Mom mid-smile, trying too hard but trying. It's awkward, it's imperfect, it's real. If you're watching this and you see yourself in any part of this story, whether you were the one who was silenced, or the one who did the silencing, or the one who stood by and said nothing, I want to tell you something. The truth doesn't expire. It doesn't matter if it takes 5 days or 5 years. The truth has a patient way of showing up exactly when and where it's needed most. You cannot rush it, and you cannot outrun it. I didn't get revenge on my sister, I didn't need revenge, I became someone who didn't need it. And that turned out to be the most complete answer I could have given, not a scheme, not a confrontation, just a life lived fully, on my own terms, with the people who chose to show up. If you're still waiting for your family to see you, really see you, stop waiting on them. See yourself first. Build the life you deserve with the people who are already present for it. And when the others finally turn around, let them find a door that belongs to you. You decide when it opens. You decide how wide. You decide who comes through. That's not revenge. That's architecture. Sunday morning, first week of February. Light snow coming down outside the kitchen window, the kind that doesn't stick, but makes everything look like it's being gently, quietly reconsidered. I'm making French toast. Owen is at the counter grinding coffee beans, singing off-key to something on the radio, badly, cheerfully, in the way that only makes me love him more. Hippo is stationed under the kitchen table in his eternal, optimistic vigil for falling crumbs. The doorbell rings. I dry my hands on a towel and open the front door. My parents are on the porch in their winter coats. Dad is holding a carton of orange juice like he's not quite sure what to do with his hands. Mom has a tin of shortbread cookies, her recipe, the one she used to make for every one of Vanessa's school events, and never once for mine. Hi, Mom says, nervous, hopeful. Come in, I say, coffee's almost ready. Dad steps inside. He looks around the kitchen, cataloging it, I think, the house he's never been in, the life he almost never knew existed. He clears his throat. Can I help with anything? I look at him, my father, 62 years old, standing in my kitchen for the first time in his life, asking permission to be useful. You can set the table, Dad. He goes to the cabinet I point to, takes out 4 plates, counts them, looks at me. 4. He sets them down, one by one, with a careful, deliberate steadiness, like he knows they're fragile, and this time he's going to be gentle. Owen hands him a mug. Mom hugs me at the stove, not a movie hug, just a quiet, human one, her forehead against my shoulder, arms around me, no words, just holding on. Hippo thumps his tail. Snow falls outside. The French toast sizzles. It isn't perfect. It isn't the childhood I deserved or the reconciliation that movies promise, but it is real. And real is more than I had for a very long time. My name is Dr. Claire Merritt. I am 32 years old, and I am, slowly, carefully, on my own terms, letting myself be someone's daughter again. 4 plates. It's a start. If this story stayed with you, if it made you think about your own family, your own silences, your own doors, leave a comment. Tell me, what would you have done? Would you have opened that door? And if you want more stories like this one, check the description. I'll see you next time.